I learned about the group chat by accident, the way you learn about most betrayals. Not from anger, but from silence that suddenly made sense. I've always been the quiet one in my family, the one who shows up early, leaves late, and never announces why. My sister Mara was the opposite, confident, loud in subtle ways. She collected influence the way others collect memories. She married well, spoke well, and learned early how to be seen without doing much. When our father got sick, the family orbit shifted. Hospital visits, paperwork, decisions no one wanted to make. I took the overnight shifts. I learned the medication schedule. I left work early and came home late. Mara posted updates. Photos of clasped hands, carefully framed captions about love and strength. I didn't notice when I stopped being included in conversations. Not at first. I was busy, tired, focused on keeping our mother from breaking apart. It was a cousin who slipped, a casual comment. "Didn't you see the message in the family chat?" I smiled and said no. Later, alone, I realized something had been happening without me. I didn't ask to be added. Silence has always been my way of watching. The months that followed were heavy. My father faded quietly. There was no dramatic moment, just a slow thinning of his voice, his grip, his presence. I signed forms, I made calls. I stood between my mother and decisions she wasn't ready to face. Mara handled the narrative. She spoke at gatherings. She corrected doctors loudly. She talked about sacrifice like it was a story she had rehearsed. At the funeral, she held the microphone. People cried, rolled with my name listed as the architect behind the recovery. Mara's smile froze, just slightly. Enough. She hadn't known the board commissioned the video. She hadn't known they traced the turnaround back to me. She hadn't known that every quiet fix had been logged, documented, and verified. The room applauded. Not loudly, respectfully. After the event, people approached me, not with excitement, with seriousness, questions, recognition that arrives late but stays longer. Mara didn't speak to me immediately. She watched, calculated. Later, in a quiet hallway, she finally asked, "Why didn't you tell me?" I thought about all the nights, all the forms, all the silence. "I didn't need to," I said. She understood then, not the work. The cost. The group chat was never mentioned again. Responsibility doesn't shout, dignity doesn't rush. And those who underestimate silence often realize too late that it was never empty. The days after the summit were quiet in a different way. People started calling me directly instead of asking Mara. Vendors I hadn't spoken to in months wanted meetings. The board sent short emails, polite, careful. They thanked me without making a show of it. Mara stayed visible. She always did. Interviews, panels, photos beside words like resilience and leadership. But something in her tone shifted. She spoke slower, listened longer. Power adjusts when it realizes it isn't alone. At home, my mother noticed before anyone else. She always had. "You look tired again," she said one evening as I reheated soup she had already forgotten she made. "I'm fine," I said, and I meant it. Tired wasn't new. Being seen was. She asked about the video. I told her it wasn't important. She didn't argue. She just nodded, the way someone nods when a long wait finally sets down. What people didn't see was what came next. The business wasn't healed. It was stabilized. That's different. Stabilization buys time, not safety. And time is expensive when expectations rise. Mara wanted growth, bigger contracts, faster expansion, the kind of moves that look strong in headlines and break quietly 6 months later. She called me into her office one morning, closed the door, offered coffee like it was a negotiation tactic. "I need you closer," she said, officially. I sat down, waited. "You're good at the details," she continued. "We can divide roles. I handle vision, you handle execution." It sounded generous. It wasn't. Execution carries blame. Vision collects praise. "I already do," I said. Calm, neutral. She smiled tightly. "Then make it visible." I didn't argue. Arguing isn't how systems change. I asked for access, full access, numbers she hadn't looked at closely, contracts she'd signed quickly, liabilities she'd assumed were small because no one raised their voice about them. She hesitated. Just a second. Then she agreed. That was when the real work began. I started uncovering the pressure my father had been absorbing for years. Deferred payments, personal guarantees, quiet favors done to keep other people afloat. He hadn't built a clean empire. He'd built a balanced one, held together by relationships and restraint. Mara didn't believe in restraint. She believed in momentum. Every night, after my mother slept, I went through files, I mapped notes. I fixed what I could without noise. When something couldn't be fixed quietly, I prepared for impact. Mara announced a major deal at a family dinner. Champagne, toasts. The group chat buzzed. I still wasn't in it. My phone stayed silent. 2 weeks later, the deal collapsed. Not publicly, internally. A partner backed out after due diligence exposed risks Mara hadn't seen. She blamed advisors, markets, timing. I didn't correct her. I simply slid a folder across her desk the next morning. Inside were emails, projections, and contingencies I had prepared weeks earlier. A way out, controlled, clean. She stared at it, then at me. "You knew," she said. "Yes." "Why didn't you stop me?" I met her eyes. "You don't stop people like you catch them." She didn't answer. That night, the group chat changed. Messages slowed. Questions appeared. My name came up more often, still not tagged, still not invited. I kept working, because revenge isn't loud, it's patient. And pressure reveals more truth than confrontation ever could. After that deal fell apart, something subtle shifted in the family. Not toward me, toward uncertainty. Mara stopped announcing things early. She started checking numbers twice. The confidence was still there, but it had edges now. Caution disguised as control. People think power breaks when it's challenged. It doesn't. It bends, and when it bends, it looks for something to lean on. That became me. I didn't move into the spotlight. I didn't ask for a title change. I stayed where I was. Quiet, available, reliable, the kind of presence that doesn't threaten so it gets trusted. Behind closed doors, pressure kept building. My mother's health declined slowly, the way exhaustion does when it's ignored too long. She forgot names. Then dates. Then which bills had already been paid. I took over without announcing it. Utilities, insurance, taxes, the unglamorous weight of keeping life upright. Mara visited more often, short visits, phone in hand. She'd ask how Mom was doing, already halfway out the door. I'd answer calmly, always the same way. "She's holding on." That phrase means different things depending on who says it. At work, the board started looping me into conversations. Quietly, not replacing Mara, just balancing her. They asked about risk. I gave facts. They asked about growth. I gave timelines. They asked about leadership. I didn't answer that one directly. Leadership isn't a claim, it's an outcome, Mara noticed. Of course she did. She started CCing me on emails that mattered, inviting me to meetings where decisions were already shaped, introducing me as my brother who helps with operations. I didn't correct her. One afternoon she called me late. Her voice was tight, controlled, but not calm. "We have a problem," she said, "a regulatory review. A minor one," she thought, something she planned to talk her way through. I drove to the office after midnight, brought files she didn't know existed, records my father had insisted I keep separate, old habits, old protections. By morning the problem was contained. Mara didn't thank me. She nodded. Wrote it off as teamwork, but something else happened that morning. She asked me how I knew exactly what to bring. I told her the truth in the simplest way. Dad prepared me. That name still had weight. Even with her, she didn't respond right away. Weeks passed. Then months, the company stabilized again. Stronger this time, cleaner, less dependent on charisma and more on structure. Outsiders started assuming I was already in charge. Insiders knew better. But they watched me differently. At home, my mother stopped asking for Mara first. Not out of preference. Out of habit. That's how real shifts happen. Not with announcements. With repetition. One night as I tucked her in, she held my hand longer than usual. "You're carrying too much," she said softly. "I can," I replied. She looked at me then, really looked, the way parents do when they recognize something they hope their child would never need. Pressure doesn't crush everyone. Some people learn to stand under it. And some people only notice who's holding the weight when it starts to slip. By the time the second review came around, everyone was tired, not visibly. On the surface, the company looked healthy, revenue steady, clients calm, the kind of stability that doesn't make headlines but keeps lights on. That's when mistakes happen. Mara grew restless. Stability bored her. She wanted momentum again, something bold, something public. She pushed for a merger. I didn't argue. I asked questions. Slow ones. In meetings, in hallways, over emails that never sounded urgent. Questions that didn't accuse, just clarified. Most people don't mind being questioned if they don't feel cornered. She mistook my tone for agreement. At home, my mother fell for the first time. It wasn't dramatic. No ambulance, just a quiet call from a neighbor and a cracked teacup on the kitchen floor. I drove over, lifted her gently, checked her pupils, cleaned the cut on her elbow. Mara arrived an hour later, apologized, took photos of the teacup, like it meant something. That night, I moved back into the house, not permanently. De-seated. I explained timelines, what was promised, what was authorized, what was quietly corrected, before damage spread. I didn't say her name. I didn't have to. Mara interrupted once. Just once. Tried to reframe it as vision misunderstood. The chair thanked her and asked me to continue. That's when she understood something had changed, not taken. Shifted. After the meeting, she followed me out. Her voice was lower now, stripped of performance. "You're positioning yourself," she said. I looked at her. Really looked, not as an antagonist, as someone who had never learned how heavy things could get. "No," I said, "I'm absorbing impact." She didn't respond. At home, my mother had a bad night, confusion, fear. She asked for my father. I held her hand until morning. The pressure didn't ease. Clients called me directly. Staff did too. Not for reassurance, for instruction. I gave it carefully, always within bounds, because revenge doesn't come from exposure. It comes from inevitability, and inevitability was getting close. The final realization didn't happen in private. It never does. The board scheduled a public town hall. Employees, partners. Press invited but controlled. Officially, it was about transparency and stability. Unofficially, it was about who the company trusted to speak when nothing could be hidden anymore. Mara was meant to open it. She always opened things. She stood at the podium, confident as ever. She spoke about resilience, about honoring legacy, about leading through complexity. The words were familiar, polished, safe. Then the questions started. They weren't hostile. That was the worst part. They were precise. A partner asked about revised operating margins. An employee asked about long-term guarantees. A journalist asked who had been directing internal corrections over the past year. Mara answered what she could. Deferred the rest. Then the chair stepped forward. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't embarrass her. He simply said, "Before we continue, I think it's important to acknowledge the person who's been quietly holding this organization together." He looked at me, not dramatically, just factually. He explained the audits, the recoveries, the clients retained, the risks avoided. He explained how most of it had happened without announcements, without authority, without credit. I didn't move. I didn't smile. I felt my father there, somehow. At the kitchen table, patient, exacting, silent. The room didn't erupt. It settled. That's how real respect arrives. Not as noise, as weight. Mara turned to look at me then. Really look. Not as a helper, not as a shadow, as the answer to a question she had never asked out loud. She understood in that moment what the group, chat, the titles, the stages had never given her. I hadn't been behind her. I had been underneath everything. After the town hall, she didn't confront me. She didn't apologize. Pride doesn't shatter that cleanly. Later that night, she sent a short message. Not to a group. Just to me. I didn't see it. I read it once, put the phone down. At home, my mother slept peacefully for the first time in weeks. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that doesn't ache. I sat at the table where my father used to teach me, thought about how often silence is mistaken for absence, how often dignity is overlooked because it refuses to perform. I never asked for recognition. I carried what needed carrying. And when the truth finally spoke, it didn't raise its voice.